Hey, y'all. Hello. All right, hold on 1 second for me. All right, let's try this again. Sorry about that. My LinkedIn is delayed on my other screen. But hello, everyone. This is Paula Bell coming with you with the 7th episode of Keeping You Wise by Keeping It Real, where we bring authentic and real conversations to fuel the soul that you can share with others. My name again is Paula Bell. I'm usually here with my co-host Chris, but Chris had a new addition to his family this past week. So Chris will not be here with us, but we all wish him well, and hopefully he will be back next month. But before I jump into introducing our guest for today, I want to just put out some disclaimers, though this topic really doesn't apply too much to it, but I always like to put out these disclaimers because we never know where topics will go. We are not therapists. We do not offer any medical advice. We are not trained, qualified professionals to diagnose any treatment of any type. So I just want to put that out there. These videos usually these live streams usually take about 45 to 60 minutes. And we have two special guests joining us today on the topic of artificial intelligence, which I know is a topic that many people have been interested in and have been using over the last few months. So our first guest is from Brazil, y'all. Brazil, we done gone international now. Fabricio Laguna is the main reference for business analysis in Brazil. He's an author and producer of videos, articles, classes, lectures, and playful content where he can explain complex things in a simple and easy to understand way. He's also a YouTuber, so you definitely want to follow him on YouTube. He's under Fabricio Laguna, the Brazilian BA, IIBA Brazil. He's also an online teacher in Udemy. He's also the IIBA Brazil chapter president, and he's been that president between 2012 and 2022, so he isn't the president this year. But he's also a consultant and instructor for more than 25 years working with methodology, solution development, business analysis, systems analysis, project management, business architecture, and systems architecture. Welcome, my Brazilian friend, Fabricio.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Paula. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to talk about artificial intelligence with you.
Perfect. Our other guest is a very dear friend of mine who, if you followed me on YouTube, on articles, things of that nature, you have probably seen us interact with each other on social media and also on my other podcast, Dojo Talk. Robert Thacker is a dear friend of mine. He was nominated as a product marketing rising star by the PMA. He's a transformation and marketing leader, speaker, storyteller, and author with success delivering substantial growth in highly competitive markets. He is an accomplished executive with rich experience developing and implementing sales, marketing, and business development strategies for continued growth in fast-paced markets. His expertise lies in strengthening compliance, improving processes, and elevating output, quality, company performance, customer satisfaction, and employee morale to all the best employers out there. Well, maybe not all. I'm just being biased. He has a stellar record in developing and implementing effective marketing strategies, directing large-scale campaigns, and managing client relationships to maximize company profits. Welcome to Keeping You Wise by Keeping It Real, Robert.
Yeah, just being maybe just a little biased.
Just a little, just a tiny bit. Yes. I am very biased when it comes to Robert. Unfortunately, that's just what y'all are gonna get. So that's how it is. That's just how it's gonna be. Well, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you, number one, for joining me on Keeping You Wise by Keeping It Real. This is a different sort of podcast that I'm doing where it's all about life, more life topics. And the co-host actually is the one who brought up AI. Chris brought up AI. He uses Chat GPT. He was the one who got me into Chat GPT months ago. But he was really excited to have a conversation about AI because he's realizing how AI has changed his life, the things that people can do in life and whatnot. And I wanted to hear from both of you who are professionals and who have done quite a bit in this space, whether it's research or education and interaction with AI. My first question to jump right in here is, what is artificial intelligence? What is this thing called AI for people who may not know?
Right. And do you want to start, Robert, or should I?
You know what? Why don't you go ahead and start us off? It's kind of a broad topic definition, so it can go in a variety of different ways. Why don't you start us off?
All right. Let's start by that, saying that this kind of definition can vary, and so people can use the term in different ways when we are talking about artificial intelligence. Usually, we're talking about computers or machines doing stuff that usually before just humans could do, right? So it could be something very simple like choosing, calculating the average in a list of numbers, but that's very simple. But if you look 10, I don't know, 50 years ago, it would look like artificial intelligence. And now we have those very strong artificial intelligence that cannot just do some kind of thinking and taking decisions, but also can learn. And that's probably the differentiator that we are living now, at this moment. Some artificial intelligence that are not just guided by some algorithm or some programming that we did, but who could just look into data that we inputted and bring us solutions or bring us responses that we don't even know exactly how they get to those solutions. They are just understanding it by understanding patterns. But there's a very wide list of different artificial intelligence that we could mention and that are very useful.
Right. Now, I guess I'll kind of, pick up from that because, as Fabricio mentioned, AI has a very sort of broad term. When we start thinking about artificial intelligence, it might mean different things to different people. And realistically, we all, whether we know it or not, deal with some level of artificial intelligence system every day, right? So we think about that most of us, have probably dealt with what's referred to as sort of a limited memory type AI. And that's Netflix, right? Spotify, Amazon, right? When you connect to those systems, what does it do, right? Well, if you liked that, then you'll probably like this, right? And that's, again, just sort of refers to sort of the limited memory. It's using your current likes and then comparing that to other people that liked similar things, but it's, as its name implied, it's very limited. And then, but other things kind of fall into the category of what's considered narrow AI. And those can really only do one thing at a time, right? You think about your phone, you ask Siri or Alexa a question, they can only focus on one topic at a time. You can't ask them to, work on a to-do list for you. You got to give them one thing to do. And realistically, ChatGPT, that's a narrow AI. That's what it is. You can ask it one question and you're going to get a response to that. So, those are most of the AIs we deal with on a regular basis. And there are other things that Fabricio mentioned. There's chatbots that are starting to get a little bit more realistic, at least in some of their responses. They're starting to think a little bit more, or at least maybe give a little bit more of an empathetic type language type response. But things really beyond that, these things that are considered like self-aware AIs or the artificial super intelligence, that's at the moment, that's still science fiction, right? There's no Skynet, right? So I have to break it to you. There's no Skynet. There's no HAL. There's no Sonny the iRobot out there that's self-aware and has a conscience, sort of doing its thing. So everything at the moment kind of falls into the sort of scope of what we might call narrow AI or limited memory AI.
So here's my question. So you both mentioned, AI isn't new. Right. It's been around for a long time. Why is it a hot topic all of a sudden right now where everybody, it like blew up over the last few months, right? Where artificial intelligence has existed, but now it's like a real focus. Why do you think it's now become such a focus?
I would say because of ChatGPT mainly, and all those other language models that became public, and people just love it and they're using it very, very much, and it has some better responses than every experience we had before with this kind of technology. So it enhanced very much the previous experience you had about chatting with a robot. So we had robots before. We had been talking to robots in a very similar way, just writing and getting answers. But the way ChatGPT is giving answers is very more complex and very more interesting than what we had before. We can even use it to review texts, to write your posts on LinkedIn, to create your anniversary card for someone, and it's useful for those stuff. And with that, people became aware of other generative AIs that are becoming available, like AIs for creating images, AIs for creating music, AIs for creating videos that are really interesting and really useful. They're not just experiments, they're useful and they're available for people. I don't know if Robert see different.
No, I would completely agree with that. And like most things, right? Once you give them a name, right? I mean, like you said, AI isn't sort of new, right? But before we talk about things like machine learning, which I mean, let's be honest, that's not as sexy as artificial intelligence, right? So I mean, once you kind of give it a nice, sexy name, and it becomes a little bit of a buzzword, sort of in the industry, people start picking up on it, and they start doing a little bit more with it. And now you start seeing a whole lot of companies, right, just kind of tagging AI maybe into their to the name of their company, right? And they do use some form of artificial intelligence in what they're doing, but most of it is what we might have referred to in the past as machine learning algorithms, right, where I can feed data in and it'll kind of look at those data sets and maybe look for certain trends, or maybe it'll look for certain patterns in the information, and now we call that artificial intelligence. So it has started to pick up in a lot of different areas because people are starting to see more uses of it. There's actually been a lot more development around it as well, and as people are starting to see more personal use cases for it, specifically along the lines of business and how it can process and help them improve their processes and make them more efficient, then obviously that picks up steam and it starts to move forward.
I have an addition to the time that we live now that I think it's different from other times, and especially with the entrance of language models like ChatGPT and all those other models that called my attention very strongly. And I had the same feeling that I had when I first saw someone using their cell phones in a touch screen. You probably remember that when Steve Jobs was launching the iPhone and they made this big presentation of how you would interact with your cell phone or with your computer using touch. And that was a real shift in the way we use it to interact with a computer. You are not just using a mouse, you are touching the screen. And that was a huge change. Before that, we could talk about mobiles and all, but probably if you think about user interface, that was another very big shift. We are not just writing commands on DOS shell, but we are interacting with screen. I see the way that we interact with ChatGPT as the new wave that is changing the way people interact with computers. So if you think that someone today have to deal with a computer program, with a software, they have to learn how to use it. They have to learn where are the buttons, how does it work, what's the interface. But with a software that uses natural language, you just chat with it. Writing down, we're writing, we're not speaking yet, but speech recognition is becoming more and more available. So if soon people can interact with software as just chatting by it, it's going to open a new world of viability for people who today are not digital engaged. They have not digital literacy. I believe that's the right term in English. So, but they have to deal with this kind of interface if they can just chat with it with their natural language. I speak to ChatGPT in Portuguese and not in English, and it understands me. So it opens connections for more and more people to interact.
Yeah, and along those, I mean, you mentioned a moment ago too. I think technology has caught up with it a little bit too. I mean, in the past we talked about artificial intelligence, and a lot of it was in theory, right? I mean, let's be real. Artificial intelligence requires a lot of data and it requires a lot of computer, muscle in order to drive those things. And in the past, unless you were a major government agency or a huge Fortune like top 10 company, you probably did not have the computer bandwidth to be able to handle such things. And so, now it's become more readily accessible to folks, and I think that's driving the access to it as well.
So as it becomes more readily accessible, can we talk a little bit about ethical considerations? So, some of the as we talk about this, right? Privacy, transparency, bias, all of that good stuff.
Right.
I've seen stories where people now are plagiarizing. You put something in Chat GPT can write a whole report for you that has information from other sources, and there's been conversations around that. Or is the person who's really created some of these articles or content, is it really them speaking, or are they using artificial intelligence to write it and take credit? Those sort of things. So what do you both think about? What are some of the ethical considerations as people who are beginning to get more ingrained in using artificial intelligence should consider as they're using it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually saw a meme the other day, which I found was hilarious. So there was a guy sitting at a computer and he's asking ChatGPT, "Hey, can you create code without copying it from someone else?" And ChatGPT's response was, "Can you?" Right. So, I mean, realistically, when it comes to like creating things, all of us scour, we do research, we look into different articles, we pull information from different sources. ChatGPT is really doing that, right? It's scanning the network and it's creating information based on what it found. And realistically, if you were writing an article, you would be doing the exact same thing, right? You might be fine tuning some of the words a little bit. You're going to obviously change the wording. You're going to put it more into your personality of how you would present the information. But it's not probably not your natural idea, right? It wasn't your idea. First, you're pulling information and you're providing it that way. So it becomes a little bit of a, for me, it becomes a little bit of a slope in how you want to kind of view the information. Is it plagiarizing? Maybe a little bit, but really what it's doing is it's helping you do research, right? And that's my sort of thought on it. And and it does. If you do have, I guess, certain references, if you ask it for references or things of that nature, you can, it's like, where did you get that information from? And it'll do the best it can. But for the most part, I think we all kind of do that to begin with, right? So
good point.
I tend to see, like Robert, I believe ChatGPT or all other tools. We're using ChatGPT as an avatar for all languages, right? So all artificial intelligence,
right.
But they're just tools, and so
Right.
we have a new tool to be used, and we would be stupid about not using a very nice tool that's in our hands, and that can make us more productive, that can make our work better, and there are some considerations that must be taken when using it, because it can hallucinate, it can bring you false information, and you have to be aware about that. It can bring some information that have biased sources, so you must be aware. It learns from a huge database that must be biased, so you must be aware about those stuffs. But I agree with Robert. Those are not new stuff. If you are hiring someone to do that kind of the job, you would have the same issues, and you would have to deal with those. People can bring you wrong information. People can be biased. People are biased by nature. So
Right.
That's why ChatGPT is biased, because he's using people information as a source. But in my perspective, there is a new ethical problem that we should be discussing, and it's huge. It's about productivity. We are saying that ChatGPT can make us very more productive, and that's probably true. And not just ChatGPT, but artificial intelligence can enhance productivity. And so there are people who are fighting technology because they are afraid of losing their jobs. There are other people that are saying, no, but there are going to be new jobs, or because we are going to be more productive, so you have more time to do better stuff. What better stuff? Why do we need more productivity? What are we looking for? For more time to work or for more time to be with our family? How are we going to share this gain in productivity as a society? Let's say that we can use artificial intelligence to make the same work that we do today in just a quarter of the time. Are we going to use the rest of the time to get a better life, or we are just sending people home to get more money, and we are using this productivity just for greed? And so I believe there is a discussion that's not started by ChatGPT or artificial intelligence. Automation has brought us to those discussions, but artificial intelligence as a turning point in technology can bring very high peaks of productivity. How are we going to share this productivity as a society? I believe that's a very important ethical problem to be discussed. And I'm not seeing very much people discussing it. They're just looking for the profits.
Right. Yeah. And I would agree with that. I mean, you got, I guess when it comes to the ethical aspect, it can make us more productive, right? And if you can do, as Fabricio mentioned, if you can do 5 days worth of work in one day, right? Does that mean you get the other 4 days off? Or are you just going to pay me for 25% of my time now? Right. So, you know, and how does that sort of work? And I think obviously automation in some aspects of things will learn, you know, the company's going to become more efficient. They're not going to need as many people to maybe do some of those manual labor tasks. And that's really sort of the whole point of AI and automation to begin with. It's to theoretically free people up to think about the deeper tasks, and, you know, how do we move forward and think about things more strategically as opposed to the manual tasks. But there's a certain skill set that comes with that. So what are organizations doing, you know, in order to upskill their people for that, right? So, you know, not everybody has the skill set to go start coding systems, or to, you know, start, you know, well, how do I type this in, or to, yeah. So they've been working in manual jobs, you know, up till now. What are you going to do to sort of move them over into a more technical role? Do they even want that, right? So how are we going to, you know, provide for our society in this particular case? And it's interesting. I actually saw recently a commercial from the 1950s, and it kind of forecasted or looked ahead to today, and it talked about how wonderful life was going to be after the year 2000, because we were going to have artificial intelligence and computers would do everything for us. So we would basically just go live our lives and, you know, be happy, and, you know, I don't know, the Wall-E world or whatever it is, but but, you know, that's what we would be focused on. We'd be focused on family. We'd be focused on having a good time. We'd be focused on whatever our social needs were going to be, because machines would be taking care of all of the other work that needed to be done. Of course, fast forward to, you know, the year 2000, and we're all worried about automation actually taking our jobs, right? So, because now what, right? To Fabricio's point, if I don't know that skill and I don't work, right, is there an infrastructure in place that's going to provide support for society as a whole if AI actually takes over these things?
So what is your response to that? So if somebody comes up to you and says, so, and actually, Robert, you're in the BA space too, because that's how we essentially met, was at BA conferences, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, you know, the business analyst space. But here goes the question. So this is something that's always come up, right? So one of the things we've had to endure when I've worked on projects is talking to subject matter experts or individuals on the project team. Sometimes they're resistant to give you information because they're concerned that what you're about to build is going to either eliminate their position, or potentially they will have to find something else in the company doing something that they may not like to do, or they may not want to do. Instead of thinking about what does this open up as opportunities for you to be able to do now that you don't have to do this task or these set of tasks that you've had to do that are now being taken over by technology. So when you hear people say this about AI, this is, again, as we continue to talk, most of the things that we're going through with AI is not new. It's just a different technology that we're dealing with, because we went through it before. What do you say to individuals like that? Or what would you say to individuals like that who are either watching this live or might watch it in the future, who are concerned about that? is this now going to take away my job? Or am I going to have to work multiple jobs to make what I make now because now they only need me for a certain amount of time? What would you say to people who have that fear?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can certainly empathize with that, right? I think you and I have talked in the past, Paula, about change, right? And understanding realistically. I mean, even if it's not necessarily about losing my job, if I don't have fear of losing my job, you're probably changing my job, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as we've discussed in the past, my grandmother used to say, no one likes change except a wet baby, right? So, you know, that's true, but change comes, right? Change happens, and you think back, at some point in time, we went from radios to TVs, from silent movies to talking movies. We went from riding horses to cars, right? We went to flying in airplanes to going to space. It's all change. It's all technology, you know, and it's moving us forward, right? And we can either be on board with it. I mean, you can complain about it if you like, and talk about the good old days when. But sometimes we think about the good old days. We're actually romanticizing the good old days too. They weren't really as good as we think they are. They're just they were just the old days, right? So, but yeah, it's kind of so along those lines. When someone kind of says that, is trying to get, I guess, ask the other question, right? Why is it that you don't want to do this, right? Why, what would be the benefit to you, or of moving into this other position? Or why would you not want, as opposed to, hey, you just need to change because, hey, what would be the benefit of you learning this? What would be the benefit of you moving into this? Or what would be the benefit of this particular change? And then sort of change the question, change the narrative of what it is that you're referring to, rather than just sort of focusing on that particular, just the negative side. I'm going to lose my job. Well, what would be the positive side of it? Let's move to that side of the conversation.
I like that analogy, and I always think in changes as waves, because they usually come in waves. And when we talk in organizations, they are constant, but usually you can see those waves. And when you are in the sea and you see a big wave, you can drown and take your head below and be very frustrated, or you can surf that wave and go forward. So technology is like a Pandora box. It was open and it's not going to stop. And so technology is coming. But what are we going to do with technology, and how are we going to deal with it? I really think fighting technology is not very wise, because it's hard. New technologies are coming. If your company is not adopting, your competitors are adopting, and you'll probably be out of the business because you're not as competitive as they are. So you have to embrace technology. You have to embrace those changes. But you should be, or we should be discussing, where are we going, and how can we drive to go to a place that we want to go. And so not just be affected by the technology that's coming, but being part of this change. How can our organization use technology in the benefit of us? How can we bring technology that will make my job better, that will make my life better, that will make our society better? So this kind of conversation usually sounds like forbidden, but they're not. Anyone could talk in an organization where they're working. Where are we going? Should we go into other place? Should we using this technology for other purpose? What are our goals? What are our objectives? Oh, that's just for the president of our organization. It's not, and he's all sometimes so lost as everyone else. He's just following the flu because everybody's using technology, so they're investing in this new technology, but nobody stopped to think about that and see how can we use it for the benefit of everyone. So this kind of conversation is important, and I believe we should bring that conversation using business analysis term. We should elicit those kind of conversations. We should bring those conversations forward. We should lead people talking about those stuff and trying to see the future, not just predict the future, but design the future. So when we are trying to say, oh, in the future we are going to live like this and like that, that's not just a prediction. It's a target that you are making, and then you can bring efforts and use resources to get there.
So, Fabricio, this one's for you really quick. So I've seen, as you have been traveling to different BA conferences and professional conferences, AI has seemed to be a conversation that comes up every single time. And there's many different conversations that have occurred as like the different types of AI, which I didn't even know there were different types until I was reading and researching. I just looked at AI as just one big old basket of things. But what would you say have been some of the key takeaways or learnings as you've been interacting with other professionals at these conferences that you've been at that have been really eye-opening for you, or has really made you think that you would want to share with others to think about as they are navigating through this new space of artificial intelligence?
Right. Well, something interesting that I've heard from different people is that they're experimenting. They're doing their experimentation about AI, and some of them had said stories about like using ChatGPT to put some source code they had in their organization, and it should not be publicized. And when you put it on an open technology, it's not yours anymore. It's shared between the world. So some organizations are trying to restrict the usage of artificial intelligence. Some other organizations are defining standards on how you can use and how you cannot, some kind of policies for the usage of AI. And it's hard to do that so fast because there's always a new technology happening every day. So, but I believe that that's probably the best you can do. Try to define some policies, try to guide your team about how to use AI, try to see what others are using and learning from each other's experience. I don't see forbidding people of using AI, as I see in some organizations, as the wisest solution. Even because they are going to use behind your face, it's available anywhere. You can use in your cell phone, so people are still using. But trying to train people or to educate people on how to use it better is probably the best way to do it. And see what others are using, how can they be using those tools, what kind of tools are available, and what kind of usage they can have. But I believe we're very in the beginning of this new wave of change, talking about waves, and a lot of new tools will become available soon, more specialized in specific tasks, like in engineers, in medics, for requirements management, for business analysts, for blueprints of your business, of your organization. So we are going to have better tools soon to be available. It's the time that we are experimenting stuff and trying to figure out what these tools should look like.
And how, and thank you for sharing that, Fabricio, because again, I've seen you very active in the space of AI and talking about it. And Robert, I know you're in the business process space, right? So you're just as integrated with conferences, interacting with professionals, writing articles. What has been some of your aha moments or things that you've heard as you've been interacting with others that you would want to share that we should be aware of? You know, some things that maybe we may not know, some little golden nuggets.
Well, I don't know if they're golden nuggets, but but I do think, as Fabricio mentioned, I think that a lot of organizations are starting to put it, experiment with it. And I think probably the realization for them is that the AI wave that is, it's coming, right? it's not even here yet, right? I mean, you're just kind of seeing the beginnings of the wave starting to kind of like form, right? Yeah, there's more that's coming, and that wave's nowhere near its crest. For you to, there's a lot of other things. But I think the biggest things that companies are trying to wrap their minds around, and the folks that I've been talking with, are just sort of, how do we define how we're going to use it, what we're going to use it for, how is it going to fit into our organization, right? And I start thinking about the process management space. How can I use AI to take a look at my process and tell me where I might have issues, or where I might have bottlenecks, or make recommendations for how things might change, or even forecast for me, potential problems that might occur later on based on the data that it's seen from the past, right? So there are people that are kind of starting to experiment, along that particular path. But to Fabricio's point, I don't think restricting it, or saying you can't do it, right, is, forbidding it is going to be the answer to the question. It's going to be more or less adopting or defining how we're going to use it, and defining what our internal policies are going to be around how our organization is going to use it and what we're going to use it for. And that's nothing new, right? I mean, that happens with everything, right? I mean, whenever something new shows up, if you think about, once upon a time, we didn't have this thing called social media, right? So once once social media showed up, what did companies have to rush to do, right? There was this wave of all of these types of social media platforms that suddenly started showing up. We as a company now think, are we going to be on it? Are we not going to be on it? Or how are we going to use it? They had to define what their policy was going to be, and then instruct their employees on, this is what's acceptable and this is what is not. This is how we're going to use it, and this is how we're not going to use it, right? So, and the same thing's will happen with AI, right? As companies start utilizing it, as they start becoming more familiar with the technologies that are available, they're going to decide which technologies we're going to use, which ones we're not, what you can do with it, what you can't, right? And that's what a lot of organizations, I think, are more struggling with at the moment. Just because AI is so new, they're not really sure what that policy needs to be.
And have you seen that most people right now are on the bandwagon of Chat GPT, or are there other technologies out there that people are using as well? Now, I know Chat GPT has blown up. So Chat GPT is definitely one that I'm aware of and I use as well. But are there other AI technologies that either one of you use that you found to be very beneficial in your personal and or professional life?
I can say some artificial intelligence that I use regularly when I do a video on YouTube. So if I do an interview like this one, I like to put those interviews subtitled in Portuguese for my audience in Brazil. After that, so there's an artificial intelligence that makes speech recognition and transform that into text, and there's a very good AI to do that. The one I use is called Otter, but there are several of them. So it's an AI capable of recognizing people speaking and transforming it into text. And they are all terrible in understanding my accent. So I have to review it all. After that, I have to translate it to Portuguese. And so I use another artificial intelligence to make translation from English to Portuguese. And so that's another kind of artificial intelligence. And I also have to review it, so they're not as good as some person, but it gives you a lot of productivity to do that. And then I have to post my video on YouTube, and I have to make a small description of that video. And I usually take my transcript of the interview, put on ChatGPT or Bard or Bing or any other of those tools, and say, oh, please take all those transcripts and make a small summary of this interview. And they do it very well. So those are different usage of artificial intelligence. Oh, another one that probably you use as well is when I have a text, from that description, and I want to change something. Even the transcript, I pass it on Grammarly, which is a very useful artificial intelligence tool that see if I'm writing it correctly. So there are a lot of tools that we are using in the day-by-day tasks, and we don't even think they're artificial intelligence, but they are.
Right. Yeah, and there's a variety of different tools, and I won't probably get into naming all of them. Obviously, we use ChatGPT. You might use Dolly to help you create some images and things of that nature. If you needed, I just wrote an article and I need, and you've even seen probably in a couple of the blogs that I've written, it'll say underneath of there, I created this using this particular image generating AI software, right? So there are different types, you might have, and as we mentioned earlier, there's ones now that are now creating music for you, right? So you could kind of give it, hey, I need something in the style of this as an intro for my video for this, and so it will give you a 30-second clip in that particular style if you want. But you're always going back and fine tuning and tweaking, I didn't have to build it to begin with, so it saved me a ton of time. But there are a lot of different AI tools for that. I also use translate tools, and I use, like as you mentioned, Grammarly for as I'm typing things out. I might even, use, and ChatGPT is not the only application like it, right? There's a dozen that are very similar to ChatGPT, just not as popular, right? So, but they're doing the same thing, and so sometimes I might even compare, right? I might ask for something from one and then go ask for the same thing from another and compare the results, right? And see exactly what I get. But the nice thing about them is as you're using them, you can always sort of fine tune your response, within there too. I might ask for an explanation, like, you asked earlier, what is artificial intelligence, right? Well, obviously we can give you a definition of artificial intelligence, but then I can break that down in any of those and say, well, but this is what my audience is, and give it that sort of disclaimer within there. I'm talking to a group of business analysts. I'm talking to a group of executives. I'm talking to my grandmother, right? And it will change the response accordingly in order to try to match that particular audience. So I use it for those types of things. I say, well, I need to explain this to this particular audience. Give me some ideas about how I might break that down.
So that's interesting that you bring that up. So I want to go a little bit deeper in that. So I haven't gone that deep with ChatGPT. I typically go in there and know what I want. So I'm like, I need a 350-word description of this particular thing because this is what I want to push out in marketing. Or I need a metadata description that would rank in SEO so that I can, with keywords and stuff like that. But you brought up some interesting ways and strategies on which you can ask the question, because it really starts with you asking the question the right way in order for you to get the output that you want based on that question. So do either of you gentlemen have any tips and techniques for someone who might be new, a novice in using artificial intelligence and wants to dip their toe in the water on how can they go about asking questions so that they get the maximum benefit out of using the tool? And I know that is a very general and broad question, but you deal with some people who just don't feel comfortable with technology and just don't know where to begin. And so what advice would you give somebody like that to make them comfortable?
I agree with Robert about iterating your questions and trying to make it better. So if you ask ChatGPT to create your post for your social network, create me an article with this information, as much more information you give it, it will bring you a better answer and a more shaped answer. Like for this audience, using this style of writing and put into those kind of informations that are important for me. And they're calling it prompt engineering, someone who is very good in making prompts for ChatGPT. And there are some tips about doing prompts, but what I have experienced is that usually when I'm trying to create something, I go to ChatGPT and I try to explain to ChatGPT what I'm creating, and it creates something out of it. And sometimes that changes my mind because I see some perspective that I wasn't expecting. And so I iterate and I come back to ChatGPT, include this thing and change this order. And so it creates a new version. And we start working as partners in creating some content. And that's very useful, not just for the creation of content, but for helping me to think about that. And a friend of me told me that unexpected benefit he got from ChatGPT is that he was trying so hard to create a very good prompt for ChatGPT that at the end of some time, when he created the perfect prompt, he didn't had to prompt anymore because he had all figured it out. So he had thought about everything that he needed.
Right.
So he said, "Oh, I become a good explainer because I have to explain to ChatGPT what I want." So as much more information you put and using those iterations, I think that those are good tips.
Right. And I think, to kind of go along with that, it's that, whenever you're using one of the AIs and you're asking it a question and you're getting a response, never accept the first answer that it gives you. Right. Because as Fabricio mentioned, I mean, it becomes a bit of a creative process, right? You read this, and I mean, and it might sound good enough, but would I take this to an executive, or would I take this, so who is it that I'm going to be talking to? So include that audience information, in there. I mean, you mentioned something a moment ago, like give me some metadata to help my website with regards to SEO. But I mean, that in and of itself is probably fine, but you're going to get some pretty generic information. But if you gave it the context of who your target persona is, right? Who is it that you're trying to reach? What are the business titles? What are the groups? What are the demographics you're trying to reach? Then that SEO is going to change, right? The tags that it's going to give you are going to be completely different because now it's got more information to work with. Here's your generic response. This is what you asked for. Oh, you wanted it specific to cater to teenagers. Oh, well, in that case, here's what you should do. So the same thing happens with you're writing a blog post, and same things happens with writing an article, a white paper, writing your resume, right? If you're asking it to help you sort of tweak your resume a little bit, tell it what job you're applying for, right? And then it can help you sort of craft the language, around that job, things that are going to be more relative to that job with the context or the information that you might have given it.
Well, no, don't do that, y'all, because I do resumes. So you need to come to me instead.
Yeah.
And let me do it for you.
And then Paula will do it for you. Yeah.
Just had to throw that out there. No, that's really good. I think this has been great just to, if anything, if anybody's felt uncomfortable with AI, I think getting comfortable with it.
I remember something that's interesting. Sometimes when we are in this iteration process of creativity and trying to experiment something new, you're kind of shy of asking. If I was working with you, Paula, and I said, "Oh, Paula, let's do it all different right now, a new version, and change everything that you told me before," I would probably be shy about doing that because it's boring, and I would think, "Oh, what will Paula think of me about telling that her idea is not so good?" You don't have to feel about that with ChatGPT. It's a robot, so you can ask it to do as many times as you want, and that's freedom that brings for some kind of creativity for yourself, to ask it to do it differently, to do it again and again and again, and it never gets frustrated or have no emotion about that, and it will not judge you about what you're writing or what you're asking. So in some way, not yet. But it gives you a freedom of creativity that sometimes if you're dealing with other people, you may be shy or you may be restricting yourself. That's an interesting stuff.
Right. I think Fabricio, nailed it. He said, I use it as a partner, right? So it's a collaborative tool, right? So think of it more as a partner in your creative process rather than, something you're working against.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or someone who is doing your job for you. No,
right.
It's your partner.
Yeah, it's your partner.
We're doing. It's not this article was not created by ChatGPT. It was created by me using ChatGPT. It's different.
Right.
I think that's a great way to go out on a positive note. I like that. So you can actually have this conversation with technology. They don't talk back to you. They don't give you that passive aggressiveness. They don't make you feel stupid, right? Because it's just you and the tech. So nobody ever has to know that you ever asked that question, unless, of course, you share it with them. But I do think that's a great way to think of it. It's a partner, one of those like silent partners that only you have access to. So private partner, right? That only you have access to, that nobody else can see what's going on. And I mean, I think that's a great way to explain it, as you know, you can ask the same question a million different ways, and there's no frustration, there's no judgment. And I like that. I really, really like that. Really,
And
really
it's
like
a
that.
good way for people who are kind of afraid of starting to use it to don't feel afraid. Right?
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
It's not spying on you. So.
Yeah.
And it's not your teenager. So like I said, you're not going to get all the attitude. So.
Sometimes that starts before the teenage years, though. You know, you just never know which you're going to get. Well, thank you, Robert and Fabricio, for being here and talking about this. So I made a little screen here of your social deets. So I'm going to bring that up really quick of where you can follow these wonderful gentlemen. But I also do want you to talk about where can people, or where do you prefer people to follow you if they want to keep this conversation going, or just see what you are doing with AI, because both of you have mentioned it on your social networks.
Right. In my case, I also have the website called The Brazilian BA. I used to publish all the articles and video there. And so if someone is looking for all those content in a single place, thebrazilianba.com would be the space. But I really invite everyone to subscribe for The Brazilian BA on YouTube. That's in English. Fabricio Laguna is another channel, and IIBA Brazil also in Portuguese. So for English speakers, The Brazilian BA on YouTube would be the channel. And please join me on LinkedIn, follow me, or connect. I would be glad to connect with everyone.
Yep, same. I'd say, you know, LinkedIn is probably the best way. Feel free to connect, ask any questions that you like there. Anything that I generally post any place else, I end up sharing it in LinkedIn. So that's just sort of a good way to stay in touch. And that profile shot that you've got there, just FYI for everyone, that's an AI generated headshot. So just saying.
I was wondering, because I was like, where did that photo come from? Yeah. I know when we talked with Joe, that was the photo that you used, but that's pretty awesome that you did that. So there it is. You see, I didn't even really know that, Robert, and I threw that up there tonight. So that was really, really good. I'm really happy about that. And if you want to follow Chris and I, Chris is not really on social media. You all have heard him say this over and over again. He doesn't like social media. So Chris isn't really on social media, but I'm all over social media. So you can follow me I have multiple YouTube channels. You can follow me as the BA martial artist on most of the channels. This particular YouTube channel I'm using tonight is my Life Coach Sensei channel. I have 4 different YouTube channels, and I do that so that, you know, SEO can read stuff and know where to put people, you know, into things. Didn't expect that to be the case for me, but I do have multiple. But you can find me and follow me online. If you want to follow Chris, though, you're going to have to meet him here, because this is the only time you're going to see Chris, because he doesn't really get on social too much. But before we wrap up, gentlemen, any last minute words that you would like to say? As I'm playing with the screen. Y'all like how I'm playing with that screen?
I'm dancing around the screen.
Right. Just bouncing around there.
Well, bringing as an ending message, something that we discussed already, but try to shape your future. Try to be part of it. Try to design your future. Artificial intelligence is available, not as a weapon against you, but something that you can use to drive for a better future. Let's work together to understand what could be this better future and try to drive our organizations into that direction.
Yeah, and going along with that, you said, don't be afraid to ask questions. All right, so as Fabricio mentioned earlier, you're a part of an organization. If you got a question about the direction, ask about it. Be a part. Be involved. Transformation involves you. So if you want to see what the future looks like, be a part of it.
I love that. I love that. Transformation involves you. Just like you want to be the change you want to see, right? So it first starts with you. Well, that is a wrap, everyone, for episode 7. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I know it's a little bit different than what we've been doing, but AI is impacting our lives. So it's still a part of our lives personally and professionally. So we may as well, as you've heard the gentleman say, accept it because it is here to stay. It is not going away. We're just going to have to figure out how we are going to use it and navigate. If you want to keep these conversations going, please definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel, my LinkedIn profile. You have all that information. Turn on notifications so that you know when we come up next. In addition, please leave any comments, as we would love to hear from you. And I'm quite sure Fabricio and Robert would be delighted to answer any questions you leave on LinkedIn or anywhere else if you have any additional questions. And I have to leave it with Chris's statement. Chris always says, for each one, reach one, teach one. So as we're trying to reach out to you and we're trying to teach, now it's your turn to go and share the knowledge and the information with others as well. We do have another episode coming up in August. I have no clue though what the topic's going to be. We have like 20 topics. I don't know which one we're going to pick yet. And I do have a special dojo talk coming up with Robert in October, which will be a fun workshop. It's very specific to business analysis and business process, but it's going to be a fun workshop that we're going to do live on my dojo talk. But until then, keep following us. Thank you, gentlemen, again for joining us, and stay with me. I'm going to cut right over to our outro, and then we will be back with the panelists anyway. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.